So welcome, Elleesha.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Elleesha, I love what you're doing, and I'm going to open this up for you to talk more about, because I am not the expert, you are, but I just love anyone who's trying to make a difference in the world and trying to, well, actually save lives. So I'm so bloody thrilled, actually, to have you on. So there you
Thank
go.
you. Thank you. Super stoked to be here, and I love what we're doing too. So, yeah, appreciate the support. Thanks.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. So so other than being a paramedic and registered nurse for the last 10 years, and by the way, I do want to say publicly thank you very much for the work you do. And I think that ambulance and all of the emergency services are not thanked anywhere near enough. So I want to publicly say that, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. On behalf of my colleagues, thank you so much. We appreciate that support as well.
My pleasure. I just wish more people would understand what you go through. So you've been a paramedic and a registered nurse. By the way, thanks for being a nurse too, because I think they go through hell too. I think they really often know more than bloody doctors do. But I won't get into a political fight here.
No,
not with you, but with.
No, it's not the platform. Good.
But so been doing that for 10 years. I imagine you will have seen a lot of stuff, and the trauma, honestly, people still say, yeah, that's just in a job, but in actual fact, I think we need to recognize that there's a hell of a lot of trauma that gets sort of tucked away in our bodies and that kind of stuff. But apart from that, you also have this very solid entrepreneurial streak, and a definite problem solver. So this time you are solving CPR problems, or cardiac arrest problems, and with your Pulsatile. So tell us what the Pulsatile is.
Well, I should say too, like, Pulsatile is the solution. And so I am working on solving a problem, but I'm a very good problem finder, is what I've found out. So I've found a lot of problems. And so now it's about, finding the solutions to match. But yeah, Pulsatile is a great example of that. And it's our flagship product at Pulsatile Innovations. I saw really early on in my career an opportunity for improving cardiac arrest outcomes, because sometimes it's difficult to recognize a cardiac arrest, and sometimes it's difficult to make a decision as to whether or not a person needs CPR. And I noticed that as a medically trained person, and I also noticed it among people who respond within the community, especially to out-of-hospital cardiac arrest settings, who might not have any medical training. And so I thought that there was a real opportunity there to create a device, which is now Pulsatile, which is designed to be put on the neck to a person in suspected cardiac arrest and inform the rescuer, whether they're medically trained or not, as to the need for CPR, and give them direction as to giving CPR or to look for other life-saving intervention. So yeah, that's the current project, and that's what we've been working on here at the little business.
I love it. So it's a little tile that sits on your neck, and with two little arms. If you're not watching the video, you can't see what I'm doing, but I've got these two little wings coming out from my neck.
Which is, patting your neck. Yeah, at the front of the neck.
Hangs in there, and so it sort of checks your pulse. Now let's go right back to layman's stuff, and right back to, well, that's not what we're told. That, because there's a lot of myths and a lot of false information and a lot of even disagreements in first aid, that sort of stuff as to how it should be. And it used to be that we used to check for a pulse, and now that's not part of it. Now it's breathing and, that sort of, and consciousness and what have you.
Yeah.
So here's the problem, right? So people go, check the pulse. And of course, if I've got my two fingers on your arm, I'm feeling my own pulse, and I think that people firstly need to understand that you're feeling your own pulse most of the time. If it's dunk, 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 dunk.
There is a risk of that. That's right. So that forms part of the problem. Yeah. And especially if you're not well trained medically, understanding what is your own pulse versus the patient's pulse, it becomes part of the problem. And so you're actually like super correct. There's been so many changes with how lay people respond to cardiac arrest. Exactly as you said, we used to ask untrained people to check for a pulse. And it just proves how much of a problem it is, because they took it out of the layperson's approach to cardiac arrest. And you're exactly right. Now we just ask them to check for D for dangers, R for response. We say S for send for help, A, check that the airway's clear, and then B, check for breathing. But we also know that it can be tricky to assess what is normal breathing or not. And so Pulsatile eliminates all doubt. It tells you categorically whether or not that person has a pulse. So you're not relying on human error or interpretation of what we think is going on. And it gives clear direction as to action to take. And there's a statistic which says that for every minute that CPR is delayed and required, chance of survival reduces by 10%. And so that's quite significant, and it's an exponential risk to life. And so if we can speed up the approach by a few minutes, we'll see improvement of survival.
Yeah, absolutely. And people might listen to that and go, oh, well, that means if it's 10%, I've got 10 minutes, to start CPR, or 10 minutes to get someone. But that's not the truth, and it's that early response is that straight away get onto it is the thing that's going to save a person's life if they can be saved. But after 5 minutes, they're brain dead anyway. Like you might bring them back to life, but you've got a huge problem anyway.
It's a big risk.
How do you? So when you're saying, and I want to come back to I'm gonna do this first, right? Because I want to. Yeah, a lot of people are thinking, shit, how do I get one of them? And can I get it? And all that sort of stuff. Let me come back to that in a minute.
Sure.
What's the difference between a cardiac arrest and a heart attack?
Great question. You can experience a heart attack, which we know is chest pain and associated death of cardiac cells, or dying of the heart. You can experience that without deteriorating into cardiac arrest. So cardiac arrest is absolutely no heartbeat, no breathing, no blood flow to vital organs. And so when someone experiences a heart attack, it can deteriorate to that, which is why we have a really strong messaging in the healthcare setting about if you have chest pain, to call 000 or get yourself to a hospital so that it doesn't deteriorate to that. So it's understanding that you can have one without the other, but it's very important to take all symptoms seriously, I guess, so that we're not deteriorating to a cardiac arrest. And unfortunately, not everyone gets warning signs for a cardiac arrest is something to think about.
No, that's what I was about to say. Are there warning signs for a cardiac arrest, or is
there are, and those we talk about chest pain or any sort of discomfort, tightness in the chest that's not normal for that person. Any associated shortness of breath, nausea, feeling sick or needing to vomit, sudden onset of dizziness or profuse sweating are all telltale signs of some heart damage being done, and things that should be taken seriously.
Yeah. I think a lot of people go, I'll be all right. I'll be okay. Don't worry about it.
No, we take those symptoms very seriously. If you have those, please call an ambulance.
Yes, exactly. And I was just saying to you just off air, we started last year, as everyone knows. Nikki's dad, left us. Her mum just went into hospital 3 days ago. She had a fall. My mum just went into hospital this morning, and these are all the things that we need an ambulance for. And Nikki's, a friend of Nikki's, also the same age, has just had chest pains this morning as well, and was in. And we're kind of going, what the hell is happening in 2025? But the point is, that's why you need to get an ambulance, because then they can go, okay, look, I think it's just theirs. Let's get you to an hospital anyway, or else this is freaking critical. Let us. By the way, ambulance treat everything is bloody critical. I know that, but so this Pulsatile sits on your neck, and it says, and it gives you instructions. Does it give you verbal and audio instructions?
No, it's a written instruction with an associated light. So it's a light indicator with very simple words. It'll say start CPR or wait. And if it suggests to wait, it's to be looking for, can you alter the position of the patient into, say, a lateral position? Can you be calling for an ambulance? Can you be supporting their breathing better? And monitoring them constantly with Pulsatile then in case they deteriorate and then require CPR.
But if you were putting that on there neck and it was saying all these things, or you were reading all this stuff, you wouldn't go, oh well, I've got this. I'll wait and see if it becomes critical before I ring an ambulance. You wouldn't do that. You'd
Oh,
be
no, absolutely not.
you'd be
Applying this and calling an ambulance and also retrieving a defibrillator all go hand in hand, and that forms part of our messaging.
Yeah. So what's the difference then between the Pulsatile and a defib? Because a lot of people might be listening going, yeah, but that's what a defib does, just talks to you. Do you know that's so?
Great
what's the
question.
difference?
So Pulsatile essentially complements a defib. So a defib does not tell us whether or not there is a pulse and if that person needs CPR. It will only tell us whether or not they need a shock.
Yeah.
And so Pulsatile works on telling us whether or not they've got circulation or a pulse. And if not, tells you to do CPR. It also provides feedback as to the speed and depth of CPR, so that the person doing compressions knows that they're doing as good a compressions as they can and giving that person every chance of life as they can.
Wow. So it's actually more informative, way more informative with what
I guess like it still is a complement to AED, like to a defib. We can't. People in cardiac arrest need a defibrillator as well, so they should not be used separate to each other. They should be used together. But the sooner we get quality CPR on board, the more effective a shock is from a defibrillator.
Yeah.
So if we were to apply a Pulsatile, start good CPR while a defibrillator is getting retrieved, that's going to improve patient outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I know personally, and I've told you about this before, my sister had a cardiac arrest and her partner thought she was snoring while she was expiring, and kicked her.
Common.
Kicked her and then went, stop snoring, and then went, something's wrong, and if he didn't act straight away, that would have been disastrous. And while it took, paramedics and what's the other one, the micro unit, to a lot of time, to really work on her, they did actually say to us she will have brain damage if she survives, because this is just
for how long length of time?
It was a long time, not for getting CPR, but for the whole process of just. Yeah. But fortunately, she survived.
She had a good outcome.
No brain damage. Incredible. I know. So it was, and it was a miracle outcome, in fact. But
also a credit to the high quality CPR she got early, because good compressions generate blood flow to the brain, which saves brain cells, which improves, not having that brain damage at the end. And that's what we're trying to avoid as well. We're not just trying to save lives. We're trying to improve livelihoods by reducing that brain damage, by getting good CPR on earlier.
So that, all right. So let's just deviate there on the CPR. So there's been horror stories in the past, I broke someone's rib and, then they sued, and I've heard those sort of stories. And I know the law says now, stiff shit, you break someone's rib, too bad, too bad, you tried. But
and you're safe for trying. You've done what a reasonable person would do under those circumstances.
Yeah. So you're not going to be, sued for that. But for a normal person who's not trained, someone collapses and then how hard should you push? I know it says a third of the chest, but is that really? I've never done it. So is that like really? And thank God I've never done it. But is that really?
And I hope you never have to do it.
So do I. So I would absolutely do it, but I hope to God I never have to do it. Is that kind of people say, do it for 2 minutes and then swap, that kind of stuff. And I've heard blokes in CPR training. By the way, I only just got a message today saying you're due for it to be updated.
No way.
That's a little bit bloody
that's ironic.
But I have heard people in those CPR training things going, I could do it for 10 minutes, or and I think, stop it, the fucking wanker, like, really.
Yeah.
So how hard is it? Like, how exhausting and how hard do you have to push?
Yes. Even for the fittest people, you need to be swapping every 2 minutes. And when we say a third of the chest, we mean every bit of it. And so for a person who's like thick or has got like quite a robust chest, or if you just think of your average well-built bloke with a chest wall, it could easily be 40, 50 centimeters. You're pushing 10, 15 centimeters. And so there is the elasticity in the chest wall, but you're inevitably going to break ribs.
Yeah.
And that I don't know, we talk about that being a sign that you are going deep enough.
So people might panic though, and I don't want to puncture their heart with a rib. I don't want to, like, oh my God, what if I do more damage? Should people think like that, or should they just go hell for leather, just get going?
I would say if a person needs CPR, go hell for leather, get going.
Yeah.
Because a broken rib or a punctured lung, if they already need CPR, is not going to be worse than the outcome otherwise. Because the outcome without CPR is certain death.
Yeah, and all the others can heal.
Correct.
Yeah.
That would require, it requires intervention and it requires a lot of time to heal, but they can be healed. If CPR is delayed for too long, they're going to die. I think we don't want to, where we run into issues with those things, broken ribs, punctured lungs, is if we're delivering CPR and it's not needed. But at the end of the day, messaging as it stands, and as I will always message, is that if you are in doubt, perform CPR.
Yeah.
At Pulsatile Innovations, we're just trying to remove that doubt.
Yeah.
But right now, as it stands, if you think that someone needs it, please go hell for leather. We'll worry about the broken ribs later.
And yeah, and I agree, and I think that's bloody sensible messaging anyway. But not a but. This is just an and, or this is an extra bit.
Comma.
Yeah, comma. It's kind of like that. There's so many parts to this. I mean, essentially the core message is the same. For God's sake, give CPR. Try and save that person's life. But there are so many nuances with the defib, with the pulsatile. With are they breathing? Are they not breathing? Is there a pulse? Is there not a pulse? What is the risk? So currently we don't have Pulsatile on the market, so what's the risk if a person has a pulse and you can't feel the pulse, or you believe they're not breathing and you give CPR, but they don't need it because there is still a pulse, even if it's weak? Is there a risk in that?
So the risk to that, Karen, is that aside from then the broken lungs and potentially broken ribs, potentially punctured lungs, and things that we don't need to be doing to them, we're also delaying the definitive care getting transported to hospital. So if we're giving CPR down the street to someone who doesn't need it, where they should be getting packaged up and taken immediately to a hospital for another condition, we're delaying that treatment, which is a risk associated. It doesn't take away from, when in doubt, perform CPR. Yeah. We still want to maintain that as a message, as a strong message. But again, with human error and indecision and uncertainty, it can come that we do give the incorrect treatment, and we don't want to be giving CPR where it's not required.
No.
And so Pulsatile, again, removes that uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're talking like medically trained people. Like you're going to have a lot better, what's the word? Chance of assessing it, more correctly.
And I've had a lot more practice, so I would expect
God.
that.
I would hate for the layperson to have as much practice as you.
We'd have issues.
I'd be saying, I'm not going out. I
Correct.
can't do this anymore. Or else I should be a paramedic, one or the other. But and it's, I think that you're hitting on a good point, because if, let's say, if someone's had a seizure, or I don't even know, I'm not
great example
trained,
but
something, and their body's exhausted, it's just this is stuff.
They might be unconscious, they might not be breathing normally, and you ring 000 and they tell you to start CPR if they're not breathing normally. As a lay person, you've hit the nail on the head. Are they breathing normally? Sometimes post a seizure, people don't. And so how can you know? That's where you were going with that, obviously.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to say is that if that's the case, and then you start CPR, that actually could more. I'm favouring doing CPR, but in the odd chance, that could actually kill them. By delaying them half an hour to get to the hospital. Well,
I'm not going to say we kill them, because we'll still have an ambulance on the way, right? Which is really good. It's really good as well. It will remove that person making a wrong decision, or an incorrect assessment.
Yeah. So Pulsatile, right? So you sold me, and I reckon you've sold everyone listening. Oh my God, yes, I want one of them. Do you know, how do I get one of them?
Me
And by
too.
the way,
I want one too.
I know, and this is hard, like because I believe we should all have a defib in our home, you know, and most of them are single use, and you know they're like $300 or something like that, or up to 600, or some of them are up to 2,000, like you know
Something
defibs.
like that.
But even just like honestly, how many times are you going to use it, and is someone's life worth $300 to $600? And of course, that the answer is get a bloody defib and put in your home, that sort of stuff.
Yes. Yes.
But the Pulsatile, at the moment, so no, I want to go back. How did you even think of it? Like, well, I know you went, I'm a problem solver. I see,
Problem finder.
I know problem finder, and then you know what we need is something to do that. But are you a tech head? Like, how
No.
did you go join the dots between hey, we need something that tells us, and actually coming up with a prototype? Like, how does the ordinary person do that unless you're an inventor or a product maker or something like that?
Yeah. Oh, great question. Karen, I literally thought of the concept like 10 years ago. I was a baby paramedic. I had attended a few cardiac arrests. I've gone, my goodness, finding a pulse manually is harder than anyone's ever taught me at school. My colleagues agreed. And at that time, I would have been 22 years old, and I approached an IP lawyer, and they said, great idea, Elleesha, come back with a prototype. And because I'm not a tech head, I went, I don't know how to do that. And yeah, the truth is that I then went and worked a lot of overtime, Karen, and I worked a lot of overtime for about 8 years and saved up quite a bit of money. And you can Google a company who will take your idea. And like I had an image in my brain about what I wanted it to look like and what I wanted it to achieve. I mean, we have a ton of devices in the healthcare setting. I'm like, how are we still doing this so arbitrarily? And so I told them what I was looking for and the outcome or the problem that I had and the solution that I wanted, the tech that I wanted to use to solve it. And yeah, sure enough, they came and produced me a prototype. And it arrived on my door June 2024. And I was quite underwhelmed because I'd spent quite a bit of money, and all they talk about I've learned in startup world that, you know, your first prototype is never going to be, it's not the final product, and you can't expect it to be as pretty as what we have in our head. But, you know, the prototype works, which is the most important thing. And it tells us that there's a pulse when there is one. It tells us that there's not a pulse when there's not one, and to start CPR. So moving along quite nicely in that space. And I've deviated from your question. Oh, no, I'm not a tech head.
No, you answered it by putting it to a company that actually does that sort of stuff. And
you know, there are people out there who do this, which I've since found out, since now being introduced to the ecosystem, they call it a startup ecosystem. There are people out there whose job it is to produce prototypes. And so, they are out there. I guess you just got to know where to look, which I didn't know in the lead up to this, but now, you know, once you start networking and finding people. And
so where would you send people if someone asked you, hey, Elleesha, I've got this prototype of I don't know. I don't know. I can't even think of something.
Yeah, I guess it would depend what it is. I went through a company called Boost Design, and they're based in Sydney, and they had a bit of background in medical devices, which, you know, drew me to them. But as I said, there's a bunch here in Melbourne that I wasn't even aware of when I started. But that, you know, I've come to know now.
But you could just Google prototype company, prototype maker, or something like that.
And I think Boost must have really good, what do they call that when the word
SEO?
Yes, because it was the top of the search, and I was like, oh, that'll do. Let's no. But no, they produced a great product, and a super communicative team I really found with them.
And so now I'll go to where I was going in that before that question, and this is what people go, oh, we need a product, and we should make it, and it should be available, you know, next week, blah blah blah. But you're talking 10 years ago, you had the idea, you know, and then you've sort of saved up the money and everything else. So you only just got the prototype last year. What are the steps after that? Like, how do we, what happens to get this on the market?
So it's been about 6 months since we received the prototype. We've been working on a intellectual property strategy. So there's a bit involved with that, including filing of patents locally and internationally, trademarking. We've done a lot of work with, I've had to do a lot of understanding of the business world, right? Developing a commercialization strategy, a business model, all these words and things that I didn't even know were, I'm a clinician. I'm not a business person. So I've had to learn a lot myself. I've had to rely on my ability to network. Even though I'm a clinician, I'm pretty good at networking. So leaning into the expertise of those around me, I found it to be a super supportive ecosystem. I say ecosystem because that's what they call it. And people are really out to help. And I think also as a female founder, the system is currently like supporting women in this space. And I've found that to be, we've got a long way to go, but I have found that I've been supported through this process. And so it's just about, finding those who've trodden the path before, making those connections, leaning into expertise, knowing what I don't know. It's definitely something that I'm still doing, still learning about. Talking to potential investors, talking to tech heads, understanding how grants and funding opportunities work. It's a huge task, but we just chip away at it one little bit at a time.
Yeah,
it's been a great learning opportunity.
I know you're going to have some patience with that sort of stuff. So you like looking for funding to build a lot of models, a lot of multiple numbers of the products. Can't even think what I'm talking about. Quantities of it, large quantities of it. But if you're talking about a medical device, do you need clinical trials first? Like, do they need to do all that? And
that forms a massive part of our journey. So this year, yes, we'll need to raise funds, but that will be primarily to get through a phase 1 clinical trial with our beta prototype, which is being worked on right now. You've hit the nail on the head there. The regulatory and clinical, the rules and the hoops to jump through are significant. We also want to look really seriously in the US market, so understanding the differences and nuances between Australia and the US, because it's a much bigger and more available market to tap into with medical devices especially. That's going to turn it into not a tomorrow job. It's going to be a couple of year timeline, which is, like I said, I'd love to have a Pulsatile in my hand right now. That's not a prototype, but we have to pass a lot of regulatory. What would you call that? Like
the laws. I don't know. I don't know.
The word evades me now, but
the word evades me. I think it starts with an R.
Regulatory.
Regulations sort of thing. But anyway.
But to understand that path and meet all of the requirements for it is a mammoth task. And just leaning into those who've done it before me.
Oh, and I'm going to ask you a question about the clinical trials in a sec, but I want to say this though. You guys listening to this, I don't know the words. Elleesha doesn't know the words. I don't know what the technical stuff is for that. That shouldn't stop you. Like that, just it doesn't matter. You can just explain it. That thing where there's all the laws, or I got the hoops and the red tape and all that kind of shit. And other people will understand you. But I think it's just got to keep. If you've got an idea, bring it out and talk layman's terms. It doesn't matter. But when people
appreciate that more too, Karen.
I think so.
People see a real person behind like the project. Much more relatable. I've noticed that with the people that I connect with, that if you can get on the same level as them, you feel a lot more comfortable to be yourself and to to really make a connection.
Well, no one's going to listen to someone who's talking bullshit and trying to put fake words in their mouth and sound like you're trying to pretend they know what they're talking about when they don't. So you might as well just say, I don't know what it's called. I don't know what it's called. But this is a great idea and I love it. When you're talking your clinical trials, is there, like, speaking of regulations, is there And does it work by quantity or by time? So, like, is it something you have to do for 2 years, or is it you have to do it on 500 people? Like,
Great
which
question.
way?
Yep. So one of the people on our advisory board would be able to speak to that better than I will. From my understanding of the process is that we need to get a certain number of patients to prove its efficacy, understand the experience of rescuers, because we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to measure that we've improved survival rates of a couple of hundred patients. But what we are going to measure is how did those rescuers feel? Were they more empowered to make quicker decisions? Did they have more confidence in their ability to perform good chest compressions? And all of those things, eventually, once we have thousands of patients, will add up to improved survival rates. But if in the first instance we can understand that that rescuer had a more positive time in their resuscitation attempt, step one complete. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, it does. And how do you control? Yeah, how is it controlled? Because like all studies are done in a control environment. Like, are you imagining it to be done in one in a hospital setting in one hospital, or is it with 10 ambulance, 10 paramedics, or like what sort of I don't know, is there or does it matter? Does it?
Well, we're exploring all of that at the moment. We were initially talking about emergency departments. And then with the team, we were saying, oh, well, then we're really going to be missing out on the majority of patients who collapse, which is outside of the hospital, which are met by paramedics. So we'll be discussing that with a range of different ambulance services and seeing who's interested as well. Not everyone's got the budget for it or the inclination, different times of year and all those sorts of things. Influence organizational decisions around that stuff. So we're just spreading the word and seeing what comes up.
Yeah, good. It's almost like you need to do the clinical trial out on the streets, like really, because
literally,
that's where people collapse most of the time. Wouldn't it be great? But like clearly, you can't. You can't just say, "Hey, listen, hang on to this," and someone having a heart attack or cardiac arrest.
And obviously, you said it yourself, has to be much more controlled than that. There's other opportunities that we'll be exploring too, such as people on in theatre, where their blood pressure might get really low or their pulse might get really low as part of the surgery. And so there's a couple of different options being floated, and I'm leaving that to, as I said, there's a much more expert on my advisory panel than me. Who's done it all before.
So what are the steps then? So you've got the prototype. That's well, the ideas first, and work it out. Your prototype. Then you've got to get into clinical trials. Now, do you need a funder? Like, do you need funding to do? You don't have to say how much or whatever, but you can if you want, but you're looking for.
It's really expensive.
Really expensive.
Really
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, absolutely, hundreds of thousands. And that's just for a phase 1 clinical trial with a few hundred patients. When we talk about recruiting more patients for further clinical trials, that could be like $1 million. And it just depends who's running it and, in what depth you're going into, who you've recruited to oversee it. Also, there's a bunch of different factors. And as I said, like all still that I'm learning about at the moment too. So just understanding that, I guess, trying to get a plan for the first one, ensure that it's success there, and that'll dictate future funding rounds and then future clinical trials.
So it could be several rounds of trying to get this through.
It could be. I mean, I think a lot of the sound advice that I've been given is too that to try and have that prototype as close to the finished product as possible, so that once I've conducted that first clinical trial, if we get the data we need to pass the regulatory requirements, then we might not have to do a subsequent clinical trial. But you don't really know until you're knees deep in the situation and in the study. So it's a see how we go.
But it's so how long would that process take? Like, so for clinical trials and then get funding to make more thing, then get it out to, well, I suppose first phase of sales, once it is all through, is medical staff, I imagine hospitals, paramedics, that's the stuff, medical centers, I don't know, whoever, where people might be showing up, that I'm sick, that sort of thing. But then also then to your average Joe, who says I want one of those in my home because I know I've got arrhythmia, or I know I've got
Yeah. Maybe higher risk, or I know,
yeah.
or I care about my neighbours and I want them to know that I've got one here. Yeah, totally. And great question. As with all medical devices, it's a lengthy and costly journey. And so we've been working on the idea that it'll still be another 3 years before it's truly on the market, safely past all the regulatory requirements. And we'll keep that as a goal, and hopefully it's sooner. But all timelines need to be mildly flexible.
Yeah.
But like a fundraising round can take between 6 and 9 months. A clinical trial can take between 6 and 9 months. Then if you want to improve technology after a clinical trial, you can see how it can add up quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a patience game and it's a persistence game, but we're up for it.
So I was going to say, you up for it? Are you giving up at any time soon?
Oh, no.
What's going to be a point that you'll say, that's it, I can't do this? Or is there no point that'll happen?
Oh, look, and that's a valid question, because even when we apply, you apply for grants and funding, they ask that question: what's a go or a no-go point? A no-go point is that a clinical trial proves that it doesn't work. I can't see that. I can't see how that would happen.
Yeah.
But I'm also biased towards my product. And so it's just about having an open mind too, that just because I love my idea doesn't mean that it's going to be the bee's knees, even though I feel like it is.
Yeah.
And just knowing that, if all neon signs are blaring at me, Elleesha, it's time to stop, I'll accept that. But until then, I'm prepared to put in the work and the effort and really see this through. Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
I believe in it, Karen, and that's why.
I believe in it too. And I bet everyone listening is going, I believe in it too, and I wish I could fund it, but we're talking hundreds of thousands.
It's a lot of
that's got to come from angel investors, or from funding, what do you call it, grants, that sort of stuff. I like when you said, I want my neighbours to know, that I've got one. We just ran a women's retreat in Cambodia last year, and one of the big things that so safety first, we want them to have a great time. We want them to experience and connect and everything, but in our house, safety first, absolutely. So we took a defib and we took an EpiPen, and we said to them, we have to tell you, we've got an EpiPen and we will freaking use it, and we've got a defib and we will use it. Now, if you don't want to be defibbed, you have to tell us now.
Let us know.
You have to tell us now, because I tell you now, we are going to use it if we have to use it on you, unless you give us specific instructions now that you do not use it. No
one said they didn't want it, did they?
No, they all said yes, please do it. But I actually worked in disability with a lady who she had a brain injury, and she'd lost her husband to a heart attack, and she just absolutely adored him. Adored him, and she got really upset one day when we were talking about CPR, because we all had to be trained, and we're just talking about it. And we said, any of you, the clients that want to learn a little bit, or that you want to raise an alarm, or what, like if you want to be involved and you want some tips on if you see someone go down, talk to us about it, because we want everyone to be familiar with at least something, just do something. And she got really upset and said, don't you dare touch me. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, no, absolutely not. And she was so upset when we said, well, you're going to have to get a letter from the doctor. I don't know if you have to still now, but that says that you do not resuscitate, and I'll get it tattooed on me. Do not. And then I heard some people actually are putting DNR tattoos on their chest. So
there are, and the validity of that in a legal setting is questionable. So that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But to the credit of that lady, I have met lots of people like that, and I understand. I do. And she obviously misses her husband, and she can appreciate maybe what she believes is on the other side, and good for her.
Yeah. Yeah, but even Nikki's mum said it the other day, don't you dare. If I go down, if I'm out, leave me out. And, I understand it. I really do. But we did take all that to our...
I love that. I'm all about that. Good for you. I will come on one of those trips. That is a well-equipped trip.
They all took the piss out of me. They're all like, "What's in your backpack, Karen?" I'm like, "You know what's in my backpack.
That's
It's easy
right.
with a
And
nippy
you're laughing
pen."
until you need it, and then
And
you'll
a
be
first
laughing.
aid kit, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, "We might not know." I said, "You'll need the first aid kit. A monkey bites you. I'll tell you what, you'll be glad I've got my first aid kit in the back."
Absolutely. Love that.
But guess what? We
You
didn't need to
didn't
use
need it.
any of them, and
And that's
thank
only because you
God.
took it.
Yeah.
If you didn't take it, you would have needed it.
Do you know what scares me more than CPR? Bloody using an EpiPen. I'm going to stab someone.
Oh, that's easy.
To
Give me
be
the
honest,
EpiPen.
I'm actually terrified of having to do that. So I've done lots of first aid with bleeding, you know, that sort of stuff. But uh, yeah, it scares the bejesus out of me. I
You'll
would
be
do
right.
it. I
You
would
would
do
do
it.
it.
But
And all of that scariness would go out the window. You just get in,
yeah,
get in the zone. You'd be
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I know I'd be right. I've done it. I have done stuff like So people listening to this is like, what do you need? I mean, chances are, like, you know, I've got people listening to this that are just doing their 9 to 5 job, and they absolutely have not got hundreds of thousands kicking around. But if somebody was listening and someone did know somebody, what do you need? What's the big ask at the moment?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, the big ask is I've made it clear that we do need funding. I think if you ever spoke to a startup, what you ask them, they'll say, what do I need? I need money.
Yeah.
And while I will need that at some point, and I appreciate anyone who's got access to that and is willing to be philanthropic in that way, I appreciate more, and I'm on the hunt more for some mentorship or guidance or people who've successfully brought a medtech device to market before who would be able to support me. I mean, I've been pretty transparent about the bits where I'm lacking, and it's knowing like the businessy stuff and, you know, how to talk the commercialization talk and, you know, understanding the regulatory pathways. And so I'm building this network around me of people who've done it before, who have good intentions and who want to do good by humankind like I do, and make a difference. And, you know, if you've got listeners or who are like that way inclined or know someone like that, I would love to hear from them. Thanks for that.
Absolutely, and it might just be someone they know. Do you
That's
know?
it.
I know nothing, but I'm going to make sure Mark listens to this podcast. You know, I'm going to tell so and so to listen to it, and because any nudge in the right direction is going to put you closer to. Well, it's going to put you closer to saving lives. Actually, not even just about your product. Like, it's going to put the whole thing closer. More
Yeah,
people being alive.
exactly.
You know, so.
Which is, as we've both made that pretty clear. That's the goal, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
improve people's situations, improve accessibility to healthcare,
Yeah.
to good healthcare. And I mean, look, there's other ways that people can support that isn't money either. Just following us on social, like we're trying to build a social media following. I'm sure you'll throw up a QR code or a link for me. You know, that sort of stuff. The cheerleading from the sidelines means a lot too. So we appreciate all that support.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're on Facebook and LinkedIn, Facebook and Insta.
Yep. And LinkedIn.
Also, you are personally on LinkedIn. So
As is the business. The business is too.
the business and yes, actually yes, and I've seen that. So please, for the business world, reach out. Make sure you do reach out through that. But also, there's the website. What's the website?
Is www.thepulsatile.com.
Yep.
And there's a bunch of information on there. Very soon, what's today, the 7th, by the end of next week, we're going to have a link up there with a survey so people can jump on and give us some hard indication of the market and how they feel about responding to cardiac arrest, which has turned out to be one of those businessy lingo things that we really wanted to formalize as having a real solid survey with good results. So that would be, we'd appreciate support from that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And can anyone do that? Like, is that
anyone?
Anyone?
Yeah,
because
we're looking for because we're marketing to medically trained and untrained people. We want results from everyone.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Thank you.
Well, I will put all those links in the show notes anyway, and I reckon we need to get you back on again on the next phase and see where it's going on down track. So
yeah, terrific. Thanks, Karen.
I've loved this. I love your product. I wish I could do more. I will be introducing you to a few people that I know, but I wanted to let Christmas pass because no one's paying attention when there's a Christmas pudding in your gob. Do you
No,
know?
everyone's having a bit of a
And
snooze, and that's fine by me.
and no one wants to talk heart attacks at
No,
Christmas. They just
no,
want to stuff their face. It's probably the worst
rightfully
of
so.
it.
No, rightfully so. We can't be talking this
I
darkness
always
all
love
the time.
doctors like you've got a real risk. It's a real problem. I just let Christmas go. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, yeah. I'll see you late January.
Yeah, exactly. When your bloods might be back to normal, then we'll
Yeah.
deal with it. Oh,
Oh,
dear.
classic.
Oh, well, I've absolutely loved this. This is fabulous. Your product is fabulous, and well, the idea, but I will say product because I'm barracking for you to have that product up
Yeah.
and
Thanks,
running and
Karen.
to be available for everyone. So, thank you very much for joining us and sharing all this.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. I'll chat with you again soon.
Thanks, Karen. See ya.
See ya. Ta-da.